when I kicked down my own gate with the fire chief screaming into my earpiece and 3,000 people one pipe away from me. Hello friends, if you're new here, then don't forget to hit subscribe button. And if you like, then hit the like button also, and don't forget to tell me in the comments where you from watching this video. Water crisis. All I could think about was Karen's smug little lock, and how she was about to be on the news for the dumbest felony in HOA history. Viewer instantly wonders, wait, what? How do you even pull that off legally, and how does she not notice? Yeah, trust me, I've been asking myself the same thing ever since, because out of all the disasters I've handled in my career, pipeline bursts, infrastructure sabotage, even that time a bored teenager tried to mine Bitcoin using a toaster and shut down an entire grid. Nothing prepared me for one middle-aged woman with a chain, a clipboard, and a god complex in pastel caprice. My name's Eli, civil engineer by trade, county infrastructure manager by unfortunate promotion, and resident of the quaintest little prison on earth, Maple Heights HOA. You've probably driven by one of these neighborhoods before. You know, identical beige homes, manicured grass cut to regulation height, mailboxes that match like they're part of a creepy cult. On paper, it looks peaceful, but peel back one layer, and it's Stepford Wives meets power-hungry mall cops who failed upwards. And reigning over all of this was Karen, vice president of the HOA and self-declared enforcer of residential harmony. That woman was a menace in kitten heels. To be fair, I wasn't even on her radar for a while. I kept my yard clean, paid dues on time, nodded politely when she waved during her 6 a.m. patrol walk. But I made the fatal error of adding a rustic wooden side gate to my property, hand-built, reinforced, and stained to match the house. It looked great, functioned even better. The problem? It didn't come with a formal architectural submission to the HOA board. That was all the opening Karen needed. First came the note, not friendly ones. Aggressively folded printouts of the HOA handbook, highlighting terms like unauthorized modification and visual deviation from community standards. I ignored the first few, thinking she'd move on to harassing someone else's wind chimes or unpainted flower pots. But no, Karen was like a Roomba with a vendetta. If it wasn't in line, she was going to hit it, back up, and hit it again. Then she escalated. She filed a formal complaint, said my gate obstructed community access and might pose a safety risk. Now that's rich, coming from someone who parks her golf cart diagonally across the sidewalk every Tuesday. But I'm a patient guy. I emailed her politely, explaining the gate was on my land. It wasn't a community fence, and most importantly, it covered the emergency infrastructure access point buried beneath my yard. You know, that one pipe that, if it fails, reroutes the entire town's water pressure through my property. Not exactly a gardening hose. Cricket. Her response? Worse, condescending HOA lawyer speak saying they'd review the easement documents and render a determination in accordance with bylaws. I'm sorry, did I accidentally enter a courtroom? The only determination they needed was this. Don't lock the emergency pipe behind a freaking chain. It didn't matter. Karen wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control. I knew it the day I came home and found an actual metal chain. Thick, shiny, and padlock tight, wrapped around my gate. Not mine. Hers. There was a little laminated sign zip-tied to the fence post like it was the scene of a crime. HOA access only. Unauthorized entry prohibited. You'd think she was guarding a national secret, not a patch of grass and some buried infrastructure. I knocked on her door. She opened it with that smile. That's all teeth and zero soul. Told me she was simply preserving neighborhood order and that further violations may incur fines or suspension of privileges. Ma'am, what privileges? The community pool that smells like chemical warfare? I told her again that the locked gate blocked essential county access. She laughed, said, if that were true, surely someone would have told the HOA. Lady, I am the someone. At that point, I could have cut the chain myself. But part of me, probably the same part that once ate a gas station sushi roll just to prove it wouldn't kill me, wanted to see how far she'd take it. So I documented everything. Emails, photos, notes, even her smug little sign. Then I let her hang herself with that chain. Metaphorically, of course. Then came the storm. Not weather, disaster. A water main upstream burst in a neighboring district. Pressure started dropping across the grid. Normally, when that happens, the county reroutes flow through a backup pipe. One of those backups, you guessed it, under my yard, beneath Karen's kingdom of chains. I got the alert at 6:42 a.m. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Water team on site in 30, fire crews mobilizing. And I was still in pajamas, staring at that chain like it was a bomb ticking down. I flew out the door, still buttoning my shirt, as emergency responders pulled up to my house. But of course, the gate was still locked. Karen, bless her heart, was already there, shouting about trespassing while literal uniformed personnel tried to explain they were responding to an infrastructure emergency. It was like watching someone argue with gravity. I marched past her, grabbed my sledgehammer from the shed, and said something I'd been holding in for months. Karen, I warned you. Now watch what happens. And I kicked in that gate like it owed me money. Chain snapped. Gate slammed open. And just beyond it, the county's only functioning water bypass valve. We got the system running in under 5 minutes. Town pressure stabilized. Catastrophe averted. And Karen? Oh, Karen was screaming about property damage while 3 firefighters ignored her like she was a squirrel in traffic. But just when I thought it was over, my radio crackled again. Eli, we've got a legal complication, said the fire chief. Karen called the sheriff. She's claiming we broke into her easement. Her easement. Not mine. Not the county's. Hers. That's when I realized something terrifying. She'd filed a land use modification request with the HOA without telling the county, and they'd approved it. On paper, at least, the chain had been authorized, which meant the next move was mine. And it had to be big. The legal complication wasn't just a bureaucratic hiccup. It was a ticking time bomb wrapped in red tape and HOA nonsense. When the fire chief told me Karen had called the sheriff, I almost laughed. Of course she did. This woman saw first responders trying to prevent a regional water failure and thought, you know what this needs? Handcuffs. And because she filed that ridiculous easement update without notifying the county, using some obscure HOA internal clause, the paper trail temporarily made it look like she had some kind of authority over my property. At least until someone read more than the first page. By the time the sheriff pulled up, Karen had a whole performance ready. She was pacing back and forth in her little floral blouse, waving documents like she was in a courtroom drama. The gate, now leaning sideways with a broken hinge and a very satisfying dent in her precious padlock, sat quietly behind her like the smoking gun she thought she'd catch me with. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her spin the narrative. Unlawful destruction of HOA property, unauthorized access, and my personal favorite, aggressive behavior toward a community official. The sheriff, to his credit, looked like he was trying to remember why he got out of bed that morning. I explained the actual situation calmly. I pointed to the bypass valve, which was now actively hissing and keeping water pressure stable for thousands of residents. I handed over the county map showing the infrastructure line running directly through my property. I even showed the original easement filed 5 years ago, stamped by both the county and, funny enough, the HOA itself, back before Karen was even on the board. The sheriff blinked a few times, looked between me and Karen, then slowly backed away and said, I think I'll leave this to the county attorneys. Karen was furious. You could see her face shifting colors like a malfunctioning mood ring. She stormed off, shouting something about lawsuits and irreparable damage to HOA integrity. I let her go. I had bigger things to deal with, like making sure the town didn't lose water if something else failed. But a seed had been planted, not in me, in the system, because now, this wasn't just a neighborhood spat. This was direct interference with critical emergency services. And believe me, county legal does not take kindly to that. The next few days, things moved fast, faster than Karen could keep up with. The county launched an internal review, and I got pulled into meetings I didn't even know existed. Department heads, legal reps, even someone from the state infrastructure board. They all wanted to know how a local HOA managed to interfere with an emergency response team during a live rerouting. I laid it all out. The gate, the chain, the unapproved documents, the phone calls I made warning them weeks ago. Everything. They didn't even blink when I told them about the fine she tried to slap me with. If anything, it made the case stronger. Meanwhile, Karen went into overdrive. Suddenly, she was everywhere, posting on the neighborhood app, sending out all-caps emails titled clarifying the incident. My favorite was the one that started with, as a dedicated volunteer, serving our community, followed by 3 paragraphs of barely coherent paranoia about infrastructure conspiracies. She tried to paint me as a rogue contractor using his job to intimidate residents. At one point, she even said, "I fabricated a crisis to gain sympathy and avoid accountability. Ma'am, I kept 3,000 people from losing access to water during a pipe failure. I'm not staging Broadway." Things came to a head when she scheduled a surprise HOA meeting. The agenda? A motion to censure me for violating community standards and property laws. I showed up. So did a handful of other neighbors who'd gotten wind of what really happened. But I didn't come alone. I brought the county water commissioner, a state fire marshal, and 2 local reporters. Karen had prepared a little slideshow and everything, complete with photos of my gate, dramatic music, and probably some inspirational quote about order. She didn't even get to the second slide. The fire marshal stood up and calmly explained that not only had my gate been legal, but Karen's actions had delayed a time-sensitive emergency response. The water commissioner followed up by revealing that Karen's unauthorized chain had breached county protocols and opened the HOA up to liability. The room went dead silent. One of the board members, a poor guy named Rick who just wanted to plant flowers and be left alone, slowly slid his chair away from Karen like she had the plague. And then the local reporter asked the question that broke her. "So Karen, when you padlocked the gate, were you aware you were blocking access to emergency infrastructure?" Her face twisted. She opened her mouth, closed it, then blurted out, "Well, no one told me," and stormed out of the room. What followed was pure chaos. Board members whispering, neighbors murmuring. Someone spilled iced tea. Karen's motion to censure me never made it to a vote. Instead, the board unanimously passed a new motion, an immediate freeze on all HOA enforcement actions pending county review. It was a diplomatic way of saying, "Karen, sit down." But that wasn't the end, not even close. Because the county wasn't done. They launched a formal investigation into the HOA itself. They subpoenaed meeting minutes, vote records, architectural approvals, everything Karen had touched in the last year. Turns out, she'd filed a lot of things under the radar. Unauthorized fines, weird citations, even a landscaping contract with her cousin's company that charged double the market rate. It was a treasure trove of bad decisions waiting to implode. Karen tried to rally support. She went door to door claiming she was being targeted by corrupt officials. Most people didn't answer. Some filmed her. One guy offered her a glass of water and said, "Compliments of the pipe you tried to block." She stopped knocking after that. But the real kicker came when the insurance company got involved. The HOA's liability policy didn't cover obstruction of emergency services, which meant that if the county decided to pursue damages, which, spoiler alert, they did, the HOA itself would be on the hook. And Karen? She was listed as the acting authority in every single document. That's when I started getting texts from neighbors I hadn't heard from in years. People who used to avoid me at block parties were suddenly very interested in my opinions. Some asked if I'd consider joining the HOA board to restore trust. I declined. I had no interest in running the show. I just wanted to fix things when they broke and be left alone. But Karen had poked the wrong bear, and now she was realizing just how far the consequences could go. The final twist came when I got a call from the county legal office. They were drafting a formal cease and desist against the HOA board, but they also had a separate file marked for individual civil liability. The name at the top? Karen. Apparently, they weren't just pursuing fines. They were considering charging her personally. And the hearing? It was going to be public. That's when I knew the woman who tried to lock down my gate was about to find herself very, very exposed. You'd think after nearly triggering a public utility crisis and being steamrolled at her own emergency HOA meeting, Karen would lay low, reflect, maybe reevaluate her life choices, and take a long walk without a clipboard for once. But no, she did what every self-righteous, power-drunk HOA warrior does when faced with consequences. She doubled down hard. Within a week of the hearing announcement, Karen filed a counter-complaint against me and the county, citing harassment, defamation, and gender-based targeting of a female official. I wish I were kidding. She tried to spin her entire meltdown into some noble crusade about being the only one brave enough to stand up to unchecked government overreach. This is the same woman who once tried to fine a neighbor for having mismatched patio furniture. The local media, of course, ate it up. The story had everything. Infrastructure drama, a viral gate-kicking video, and a woman who genuinely believed she was the last line of defense between suburban order and anarchy. They aired a clip of Karen standing on her porch, dramatically clutching the same clipboard she'd used to tape violations to mailboxes, claiming she was being vilified for doing her duty. What she didn't realize was that at that very moment, the county was finalizing its official report, and it was not kind. When that report dropped, it was like throwing gasoline on a bonfire. It outlined, in painstaking detail, how Karen's unauthorized obstruction of emergency infrastructure had delayed response times during a live incident, risked contamination due to pressure drops, and violated at least 3 state-level emergency protocols. The cherry on top? The county revealed that Karen had altered HOA documentation after the fact to try and cover her tracks. She backdated the easement filing. Not smart when dealing with a government agency that timestamps everything. Karen's defense crumbled faster than a stale cookie. Even the HOA board, which had once cowed under her passive-aggressive reign, started jumping ship. 2 members resigned within 48 hours. One emailed me a formal apology for not taking your earlier warnings seriously. The other just left a sticky note on the HOA office door that read, "Nope." And then came the press conference. The county commissioner stood at a podium flanked by representatives from public safety and utilities and calmly explained that the HOA's actions, specifically Karen's actions, had crossed from petty mismanagement into public endangerment. To make matters worse for her, a local news outlet got their hands on Karen's neighborhood app messages. You know, the ones where she bragged about locking down Eli's little gate problem once and for all. Screenshots of her rants about infrastructure isn't that important were plastered on every feed. She became the unwilling face of why HOAs shouldn't have unchecked power. Memes exploded. Someone edited a video of her speech with dramatic music and the phrase Karen versus the county in flaming letters. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so sad. But she still wasn't done. She showed up to the first hearing with a folder thick enough to choke a filing cabinet and a new lawyer who looked like he regretted his life choices from the second she opened her mouth. She tried to argue that I had a personal vendetta against her, that I had baited her into obstructing the gate so I could humiliate her publicly. The judge, a woman with the patience of a monk and the face of someone who'd raised 3 teenagers, calmly asked Karen, "And how exactly does one bait someone into padlocking emergency infrastructure?" Karen stammered something about tone and disrespect. The judge cut her off. "You filed a restriction on a critical utility access point during a documented pipeline emergency. That's not tone. That's obstruction." The room went quiet. Karen looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Her lawyer gently suggested they take a recess. The judge denied it. It was one of those moments you don't forget. Watching someone who'd spent so long wielding authority like a weapon suddenly realize she brought a Nerf bat to a gunfight. The county attorney laid out the consequences: civil liability, personal fines, potential criminal negligence if the case escalated. The numbers were brutal. Over $100,000 in potential damages tied to delays, emergency overtime, and risk mitigation. And because she acted outside of county-approved guidelines, the HOA's insurance wouldn't cover her. For once, Karen had no one left to blame. Back in the neighborhood, things started shifting. With Karen removed from her post pending further investigation, the remaining board members scrambled to clean up the mess. They temporarily suspended all citations, paused fines, and called a community meeting to restore transparency. People who'd never spoken at HOA events started showing up. They shared stories of Karen's abuse of power, fines for leaving Halloween decorations up too long, threats over paint shades, bogus complaints about noise violations from kids playing in their own yard. And as if the universe had a flair for the poetic, Karen's own house fell under scrutiny. Turns out her sunroom extension, which she'd been bragging about in newsletters, was built without a permit. No inspection, no approvals, just a quiet contractor visit and a cash payment. The same woman who fined a retired couple $75 for planting non-native Elias had an illegal structure attached to her home. Within a week, she was slapped with a $4,200 fine and a notice to tear down or bring it up to code. She tried to fight it, but the new acting board president simply smiled and said, "We're just following policy." I can't lie, watching this all unfold was satisfying in a way that's hard to describe. It wasn't just revenge, it was balance. For years, people in the neighborhood had tiptoed around Karen like she was some HOA dragon guarding the gates of suburbia. Now, the dragon had tripped over her own tail, and fallen face-first into her own moat. But the best moment, the moment that truly cemented the poetic justice of it all, that came one sunny afternoon, 2 weeks after the hearing. I was out front replacing the broken hinge on my side gate, the same one Karen had chained shut. A couple walked by, tourists apparently visiting friends in the neighborhood. They stopped, squinted at the plaque I had made and installed on the fence. It read, "Here stood the gate that almost cost a town its water, dedicated to poor decisions and excellent timing." The woman laughed. The man asked if it was a joke. I told him no. It was a very real reminder of what happens when power is used without purpose. He nodded and said, "That's wild." Then he pulled out his phone and said, "Is this the neighborhood with the gate lady? I think I saw her on TikTok." I smiled. Yes, it is. But while the viral fame was entertaining, it wasn't the end of the story. Because even with Karen's public downfall and the HOA under scrutiny, I knew she wasn't going quietly. People like her don't. They just regroup. And sure enough, I got a certified letter in the mail a few days later. Karen was threatening to sue me personally for emotional distress, property destruction, and defamation. The letter was typed in Comic Sans. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I poured a drink, opened the letter, and smiled. Because the only thing better than surviving Karen's reign of terror was knowing that she just fired her final shot straight into her own foot. And something told me the best was still yet to come. Karen's lawsuit threat was as ridiculous as it was predictable. Emotional distress? From what? Losing control of a fake title she created for herself. Property destruction? The gate she illegally chained shut on my land? And defamation? That was rich coming from someone whose own emails had been printed, highlighted, and read aloud in a public hearing. I wasn't worried. If anything, I was mildly impressed she was still fighting. It's not every day someone throws themselves face-first into a reputation with chipper and comes out thinking they still have a case. But she wasn't suing for justice. Karen was trying to claw back relevance. In her mind, she wasn't a laughingstock. She was a martyr, a misunderstood hero who had simply tried to protect the neighborhood from rogue gates and independent thinking. The new HOA board didn't take kindly to the lawsuit either. With her no longer officially in power, they moved quickly to scrub her influence from every corner of Maple Heights. They invalidated her past fines, rewrote several bylaws she had twisted into power plays, and voted to ban her from holding any future HOA office. It wasn't just damage control, it was a public cleansing, a neighborhood exorcism. And the neighbors? They threw a barbecue. Seriously, an actual block party, complete with flyers that said, "Now that the gate's open, let's celebrate." There were burgers, cornhole, a bounce house, and a playlist that definitely included another One Bites the Dust. Karen didn't show up, but she didn't stay quiet either. She sent a mass email the morning after titled "A Neighborhood Betrayed," where she accused everyone from the fire marshal to the guy who runs the local hardware store of being in on some grand conspiracy. She ended it with a quote from a Roman emperor and a picture of herself smiling next to the locked gate from 6 weeks prior. I didn't even read the whole thing. Someone forwarded it to me with the subject line, "Karen's Manifesto, Part 3. But behind all the chaos, the county investigation kept grinding forward. The final audit results dropped just as her lawsuit was being laughed out of a courtroom. Not only did the audit confirm her misuse of HOA funds and multiple bylaw violations, it uncovered something new. Turns out Karen had submitted a forged maintenance invoice for over $9,000 for landscaping work that never happened. The supposed vendor? A company her nephew ran out of a P.O. box in another state. That little detail turned a civil investigation into a criminal one. And just like that, Karen's crusade against my gate turned into a felony fraud case. Her face wasn't on the news this time, but her name sure was. Every local outlet ran the headline. HOA Vice President under investigation for fraud after infrastructure incident. It was like watching the final season of a bad reality show, where the villain runs out of confessionals and just disappears mid-episode. Except Karen didn't vanish entirely. She sold her house quietly, without fanfare. Word got around she'd taken a loss on the sale too. Apparently, not a lot of buyers were eager to move into the Gate Karen neighborhood. I didn't see her pack up, didn't watch the moving truck. But one morning, I walked out and noticed her house was dark, mailbox empty, blinds shut, and that stupid little clipboard that used to sit by her front door was gone. Just like that, she was out, erased from the place she tried so hard to control. There was something poetic about it. No one forced her out with torches and pitchforks. She just unraveled herself, one bad decision at a time. In her absence, Maple Heights began to feel like a neighborhood again. People stopped whispering about lawn violations. Kids actually played in the front yard. Neighbors started talking to each other like humans, not suspects. The HOA meetings became shorter, less tense, and infinitely more useful. Instead of fighting over paint swatches, they discussed actual community improvements, like solar lights on walking paths and fixing the potholes Karen pretended didn't exist. As for May got my gate fixed, installed a new hinge, added a weather-resistant latch, and reinforced the post, just in case someone got bold with another padlock. But the real cherry on top was the plaque I mounted on the fence, bronze, polished, and professionally engraved. It read, "On this spot, a very dumb lock almost shut down a town. In memory of poor decisions." Neighbors loved it. It became a conversation starter. Visitors would ask, "Is this that viral gate from the news?" And I'd smile and say, "Oh yeah, the legend lives on." What I didn't expect was the letter that showed up a month later. Not from Karen, from her new neighbor. Apparently, she'd moved to a nearby town just outside HOA jurisdiction. Bought a fixer-upper with room for improvement, according to the listing. Her neighbor, a retired firefighter, recognized her immediately from the news clips and TikTok videos. He said she